The smell hit me first. Expensive cologne mixed with cheap wine, lingering in my living room like a guilty secret. I stood in my own doorway at 11:47 p.m., still wearing my electrician's uniform, tool belt heavy on my hips, staring at the evidence of my wife's lie spread across our coffee table like a crime scene. "Gray, you're home early." Elise's voice drifted from the kitchen, artificially bright, the way it got when she was scrambling to cover her tracks. Night shift ended at 11, same as always. I kicked off my work boots, studying the scene. 2 wine glasses, both with lipstick marks, different shades. A half-empty bottle of that overpriced Bordeaux she only brought out for special occasions. And there, carelessly tossed on the couch, a man's leather jacket that definitely wasn't mine. "I thought you were staying at Lena's tonight," I called back, unbuckling my tool belt. "Something about a girls' night and too much wine to drive home safely?" The silence stretched long enough for me to count the lies embedded in it. Elise appeared in the kitchen doorway, barefoot, wearing that black dress she saved for client meetings and date nights. Her auburn hair was mussed, makeup slightly smeared. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of movement, someone ducking toward the back door. "Plans changed," she said, smoothing her dress with hands that trembled just slightly. "Victor stopped by to drop off some work files. You know how demanding the Peterson project has been." Victor Sloan, her colleague at the tech firm, the guy with the Tesla and the attitude to match. The same Victor who'd made it clear at last year's company barbecue that he thought blue-collar guys like me weren't good enough for women like Elise. Victor, huh? I walked to the coffee table, picked up the leather jacket. Italian leather. Expensive. The cologne smell was stronger now, mixed with something else. Guilt, maybe. Must have been some urgent files to require wine service. "Don't start, Gray." Elise's voice sharpened, taking on that tone she used when she was preparing to make me the villain. "I don't question your late nights at Murphy's bar with Eddie and the union guys. Murphy's doesn't serve wine in crystal glasses." I held up one of the glasses, noting the lipstick shade that definitely wasn't Elise's usual red, and Eddie's never left his jacket on my couch. The back door clicked shut. Subtle, but not subtle enough. Elise's face flushed. "You're being paranoid. Victor's married, for God's sake." "So are you." The words hung between us like a challenge. Elise's green eyes flashed with something. Anger, fear, defiance. Maybe all 3. "I don't have to justify having a colleague over for work," she said, crossing her arms. "Just because you're stuck running electrical wire through walls doesn't mean the rest of us don't have real careers that require actual collaboration." There it was. The dig at my profession, the subtle reminder that she made twice my salary managing software implementations while I crawled through attics and basements keeping the lights on. She'd been using that line more frequently lately, especially when she was deflecting. "Right. Work." I set the glass down carefully, noting the way her eyes tracked my movements. "At 11:30 on a Friday night. In your date dress. With wine. It's not a date dress, it's professional attire. It's the dress you wore to Romano's for our anniversary." Elise's mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, but calculation. She was deciding how much truth she could afford. "I'm going to bed," she said finally. "This conversation is ridiculous." She brushed past me, heading for the stairs. I caught her wrist gently, not restraining, just connecting. "Elise." My voice was quieter now, serious. "If something's going on, if you're unhappy, we can talk about it. We can fix it." For just a second, her expression softened. I saw the woman I'd married 5 years ago, the one who used to laugh at my sarcastic commentary on late-night movies, who'd curl up against me during thunderstorms in our first apartment. Then the mask slipped back into place. "There's nothing to fix, Gray. You're imagining things." She pulled free of my grip. "Maybe if you spent less time looking for problems and more time working on yourself, you'd see that." She headed upstairs, leaving me alone with the evidence of her lie and the lingering scent of another man's cologne. I picked up Victor's jacket, checking the pockets out of habit, the same thoroughness that made me good at troubleshooting electrical problems. Inside the breast pocket, a receipt from Romano's. Tonight's date. 2 dinners, a bottle of wine, and dessert for 2. The same restaurant where Elise and I had celebrated our anniversary 3 months ago. I sat heavily on the couch, jacket in my hands, staring at the receipt. 5 years of marriage, and it had come to this. lies told with practiced ease, insults designed to make me doubt myself, and evidence left behind like breadcrumbs leading to the truth she thought I was too stupid to follow. Upstairs, I heard the shower running. Washing away the evidence, probably. Or maybe just washing away the guilt. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. The glasses, the wine bottle, the receipt. Not for any legal reason, just for clarity. Sometimes when you're being gaslighted, you need proof for yourself that what you're seeing is real. The shower was still running when I heard a car start outside. Through the front window, I watched Victor's Tesla pull away from the curb where it had been parked behind Mrs. Callahan's hedge. Subtle. If I'd parked in the driveway like usual instead of on the street, I never would have seen it. My phone buzzed. A text from Eddie. Murphy's is still open if you need to talk. Saw the Tesla on Maple Street when I drove by. Eddie Morrison had been my work partner for 3 years, and my friend for longer. He lived 2 blocks over and had a habit of noticing things. Useful trait in an electrician, less useful in a friend watching your marriage fall apart in real time. I texted back. Rain check. Need to think. But thinking was dangerous right now. Thinking led to planning, and planning led to the kind of trouble I wasn't sure I was ready for. The shower shut off. I heard Elise moving around upstairs, probably rehearsing her story for tomorrow, polishing the lies until they shone like truth. I looked at Victor's jacket again, then at the receipt. Romano's was expensive, the kind of place you went for special occasions. Or seduction. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. Your wife's car is in the parking lot at the Riverside Inn. Room 237. Thought you should know. A friend. The Riverside Inn, the place where out-of-town business travelers stayed, and where locals went when they wanted privacy. I stared at the text for a long moment, then deleted it. But the damage was done. The seed of certainty had been planted, and it was growing fast. Upstairs, Elise was humming softly, something she only did when she was particularly pleased with herself. I folded Victor's jacket carefully and placed it on the coffee table where she'd be sure to see it in the morning. Let her wonder how much I knew. Let her sweat a little. Then I headed down to my basement workshop, where I did my best thinking, surrounded by wire strippers and voltage testers, and the honest simplicity of electrical circuits, where problems had clear solutions and current flowed in predictable patterns. Unlike marriages. Unlike trust. Unlike the growing certainty that my wife was playing a game where I didn't even know the rules. But I was about to learn. The basement workshop was my sanctuary, organized chaos that made perfect sense to me and no sense to anyone else. Spools of wire arranged by gauge, tools hung in precise order, and a workbench scarred by years of honest labor. This was where I came to solve problems, and right now I had a big one. I pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Not because I was planning anything dramatic, but because that's how I approached any complex job. Break it down into components, understand the system, identify the weak points. What I knew for certain, Elise was lying. The evidence was circumstantial but consistent. The cologne, the wine glasses, Victor's jacket, the restaurant receipt, the mysterious text about the Riverside Inn. What I suspected, this wasn't the first time. The late meetings, the business trips that got canceled or extended, the new clothes and sudden interest in going to the gym. Classic signs that I'd been too trusting or too stupid to recognize. What I needed? More information. Real proof, not just suspicions and circumstantial evidence. I opened my laptop and started researching. Not anything illegal or invasive. I wasn't about to become some creepy stalker husband. But public information was fair game, and I had skills that most people underestimated. 20 years of electrical work teaches you to think systematically. Every building has patterns, every system has logic, and every problem has a solution if you're patient enough to find it. Victor Sloan lived in Harborview condos, the expensive complex downtown with the doorman and the underground parking. Married to Patricia Sloan, a real estate agent who specialized in high-end properties. No kids. 2 cars registered to his address, the Tesla and a BMW SUV. I cross-referenced his social media with Elise's. They'd been tagged together in photos going back 8 months, always in groups, always at work events or professional conferences. But the body language was telling once you knew what to look for. The way they stood just slightly too close, the way his hand lingered on her shoulder, the way she smiled at him in photos. My phone rang. Eddie. Couldn't sleep either, he said without preamble. Working on a project. At 1 a.m? Must be some project. Eddie knew me well enough to read between the lines. We'd worked together long enough to develop a shorthand, the kind of communication that happens between people who trust each other completely. The kind that requires careful planning, I said. Need a second pair of hands? Maybe. Let me figure out what I'm dealing with first. Gray. Eddie's voice got serious. Whatever you're thinking, don't do anything stupid. She's not worth prison time. I'm not planning anything illegal. Good, but if you need to talk, or if you need backup for something legal but inadvisable, you know where to find me. That was Eddie. Loyal to a fault. Willing to help even when he thought I was making a mistake. It's why I'd trust him with my life, and why I was careful not to drag him into anything that could blow back on him. After he hung up, I went back to my research. Elise's patterns were becoming clearer now that I was paying attention. The late nights always fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays, days when I worked the evening shift and wouldn't be home until after 11. The business trips that got extended were always to cities where Victor's company had clients. The new gym membership she'd gotten 3 months ago was at the same fitness center where Victor worked out. I felt like an idiot for missing it all, but maybe that was the point. She'd been counting on my trust, my assumption that she was being honest. She'd weaponized my respect for her privacy and turned it into cover for betrayal. The anger was building now, a steady current running through my thoughts. Not the hot, explosive kind that leads to stupid decisions, but the cold, calculating kind that gets things done. I heard footsteps upstairs. Elise moving around, probably getting ready for bed. In a few minutes, she'd come down and ask what I was doing, make some comment about me working too late, try to normalize the evening like nothing had happened. I minimized my browser windows and pulled up a schematic for a commercial job we were bidding next week. When she appeared at the bottom of the stairs in her robe, I was sketching wire runs and calculating load requirements. Still working? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Murphy's Law bid is due Monday. Eddie and I want to make sure our numbers are right. She moved closer, looking over my shoulder at the drawings. I could smell her shampoo, the same scent that used to comfort me. Now it just reminded me of the shower she'd taken to wash away evidence. You work too hard, she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Someone has to pay for the wine you serve to your colleagues. The words came out before I could stop them, edged with just enough sarcasm to make her hand tighten on my shoulder. Gray. Sorry, long day. I kept my eyes on the schematic, pencil moving steadily. Victor get his jacket? What jacket? The leather one he left on the couch. Italian leather, expensive. Figured he'd want it back. I felt her tense behind me. Oh, that. Yes, I'll get it to him Monday. Good. Hate for him to have to explain to his wife where he left it. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Elise's hand slipped from my shoulder. I'm going to bed, she said finally. I'll be up in a bit. Just want to finish this section. She hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. Gray? Are we okay? I looked up at her then, studying her face. She looked genuinely concerned, maybe even a little guilty. For a moment, I wondered if I was wrong, if there was some innocent explanation for everything I'd seen. Then I remembered the receipt in Victor's pocket. Tonight's date. 2 dinners, wine, dessert for 2. We're fine, I said. Just tired. She nodded and headed upstairs. I waited until I heard our bedroom door close, then went back to my real work. By 3 a.m., I had a clearer picture. Victor and Elise had been careful, but not careful enough. Social media posts that put them in the same locations on days when she'd claimed to be elsewhere. Credit card receipts that contradicted her stories about where she'd been and who she'd been with. A pattern of deception that went back months. I also had a plan. Not for revenge, not yet, but for confirmation. I needed to be absolutely certain before I did anything irreversible. The next morning, Elise was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to yoga, then lunch with Lena. Back this afternoon. Love you. Love you. The words felt hollow now, performative, like everything else in our marriage had become. I made coffee and called Eddie. Need that favor now, I said when he answered. What kind of favor? The kind where you help me find out if my wife is cheating on me. Eddie was quiet for a long moment. You sure you want to know? I'm sure I need to know. All right. What do you need? Meet me at Murphy's at noon. And Eddie, bring your camera. Murphy's bar at noon on a Saturday was exactly what you'd expect. Dim lighting, the smell of fried food and spilled beer, and a handful of regulars nursing hangovers and regrets. Eddie was already there when I arrived, sitting in our usual booth in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard. This feels like a bad idea, he said, as I slid into the seat across from him. Most of the best ideas start that way. Eddie Morrison was built like a fire hydrant. Short, solid, and reliable in a crisis. We'd met on a job site 7 years ago and discovered we both had a talent for solving problems other people considered impossible. He was also the most honest person I knew, which made his next question predictable. You really want to go down this road? Because once you have proof, you can't unknow it. I already know it, Eddie. I just need to be sure. He nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone. What's the plan? I laid out what I'd learned. The patterns, the lies, the evidence that was circumstantial but consistent. Eddie listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions that showed he was thinking like the methodical troubleshooter he was. So you want to follow her, he said when I finished. I want to document her. There's a difference. Is there? Following implies I'm going to confront them or do something stupid. Documenting means I'm gathering information for future decisions. Eddie signaled the bartender for another beer. What kind of future decisions? The kind that require lawyers. That got his attention. Eddie had been through a messy divorce 3 years ago and knew exactly what good documentation could mean in court. All right, he said. But we do this smart. No trespassing, no breaking any laws. Nothing that could blow back on us later. Agreed. And if we find what you think we're going to find, you promise me you won't do anything stupid in the heat of the moment. Define stupid. Anything that involves violence, property damage, or criminal charges. I thought about that. The anger was still there, cold and steady, but I wasn't looking to destroy my own life in the process of dealing with hers. I promise. Eddie finished his beer and stood up. Then let's go catch your wife cheating on you. We started with a yoga studio where Elise claimed to be spending her Saturday morning. It was a trendy place downtown, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. Eddie parked across the street while I went inside to check. Excuse me, I said to the young woman at the front desk. I'm supposed to pick up my wife after her class, but I can't remember what time it ends. Elise Foster? She checked her computer, frowning. I don't show an Elise Foster registered for any classes today. Are you sure she said here? Maybe I got the wrong location. Thanks anyway. Strike one. I walked back to Eddie's truck with a familiar tightness in my chest. Not there? He asked. Not even registered. Where to next? Lena's house. She's supposedly having lunch with her best friend. Lena Hartwell lived in a suburban development about 15 minutes away. Cookie-cutter houses with perfect lawns and two-car garages. We drove slowly past her house, noting the empty driveway and the newspapers still sitting on the front step. Nobody's home, Eddie observed. Or they're being very quiet. You want to knock? I considered it, then shook my head. Not yet. Let's check the other places first. We spent the next 2 hours driving around town, checking the locations where Elise might actually be. The gym where she claimed to work out. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. The coffee shop where she sometimes met clients. No sign of her. The mall where she liked to shop. Nothing. Finally, Eddie pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Inn. There, I said, pointing to a familiar blue Honda Civic in the far corner of the lot. That's her car. Eddie parked 3 spaces away and turned off the engine. Now what? Now we wait. For how long? As long as it takes. We'd been sitting there for 20 minutes when Victor's Tesla pulled into the lot. He parked next to Elise's car, looked around quickly, then headed for the side entrance of the hotel. That's him? Eddie asked. That's him. Smug-looking bastard. Wait until you hear him talk. Eddie raised his phone and started recording as Victor disappeared into the building. Got his license plate and a clear shot of his face. What room did that text say? 237. Second floor, probably facing the parking lot. Eddie studied the building. There, third window from the left. Curtains are drawn, but there's light behind them. We waited another hour. Eddie dozed in the driver's seat while I watched the window and tried not to think about what was happening behind those curtains. The anger was building again. But underneath it was something worse. A deep sense of betrayal. that went beyond the physical act of adultery. It wasn't just that Elise was sleeping with another man. It was the elaborate web of lies she'd constructed to cover it up, the casual way she'd gaslighted me when I'd ask questions, the months of making me feel paranoid and suspicious when my instincts had been right all along. At 3:15, the curtains moved. A few minutes later, Victor emerged from the side entrance, again looking around carefully before walking to his car. He drove off without looking back. Elise appeared 10 minutes later. She walked more slowly, checking her phone, running her fingers through her hair. She looked satisfied, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen at home in months. Eddie raised his phone again, recording as she got into her car and drove away. "That's it then," he said quietly. "That's it." We followed her at a distance, watching as she drove to the grocery store and spent 20 minutes buying ingredients for dinner, playing the role of the devoted wife, picking up food to cook for the husband she'd just betrayed. "What now?" Eddie asked as we watched her load groceries into her car. "Now I go home and pretend I don't know anything while I figure out my next move. Gray." Eddie's voice was serious. "I know you're pissed, and you have every right to be, but don't let this eat you alive. Whatever you decide to do it clean and do it smart." "I will. And remember, the best revenge is living well." I looked at him. "Is it?" "Sometimes. But sometimes the best revenge is making sure the people who screwed you over face consequences for their actions." That evening, Elise cooked dinner like nothing had happened. She was in a good mood, humming while she worked, asking about my day, playing the perfect wife. It was a masterful performance, and it might have worked if I hadn't spent the afternoon watching her walk out of a hotel room. "How was yoga?" I asked over dinner. "Great. Really challenging class. I'm going to be sore tomorrow." "And lunch with Lena?" "Oh, you know Lena. She's having drama with her boyfriend again." I spent 2 hours listening to her complain about men who don't appreciate what they have. The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. "Sounds exhausting," I said. It was. But that's what friends do for each other, right? We show up when it matters. Right. Loyalty. Something in my tone made her look up from her plate. "Is everything okay? You seem distant." "Just tired. Long week." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know you work hard, Gray. I appreciate everything you do for us. U.S. Like we were still a team. Like she hadn't spent the afternoon in a hotel room with another man while I was home missing her." "I love you," she said, and for a moment her voice sounded almost sincere. "I love you too," I replied, automatically. But as I said the words, I realized they weren't true anymore. You can't love someone who treats you like a fool. You can't love someone who lies to your face while holding your hand. What I felt now was something colder and more focused. A desire for justice, maybe. Or just a need to make sure that actions had consequences. That night, after Elise fell asleep, I went back down to my workshop and started planning in earnest. Not just documentation now, but strategy. Because Eddie was wrong about one thing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't living well. Sometimes the best revenge is making sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with. 2 weeks of careful observation had given me everything I needed to know. Elise and Victor had a pattern. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at the Riverside Inn, always room 237. Always the same careful choreography of arrival and departure. She'd constructed an elaborate schedule of fake appointments and fictional errands to cover her tracks. But patterns were also vulnerabilities, and I'd learned a lot about exploiting vulnerabilities over the years. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when Elise returned from one of her client meetings with a gift, an expensive bottle of wine from Romano's. "Thought we could celebrate," she said, setting the bottle on the kitchen counter with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Celebrate what?" "The Peterson project got approved for Phase 2. Big bonus coming my way." I studied the bottle. Same vintage Victor had been drinking the night I'd found his jacket on our couch. "That's great news. Where did you say this client meeting was?" "Downtown. The Meridian building." She was already moving toward the stairs, eager to end the conversation. "I'm going to take a shower." "Why don't you open the wine?" "The Meridian building. I'd driven past it an hour ago on my way home from work. The parking lot had been nearly empty. and the building directory showed no businesses that matched Elise's supposed client. I opened the wine and poured 2 glasses, then sat at the kitchen table to wait. The anger was different now, not hot and impulsive, but cold and patient. The kind of anger that made good decisions instead of stupid ones. Elise came downstairs 20 minutes later, hair still damp, wearing the silk blouse I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked beautiful and relaxed, the way she used to look when we were happy. "You opened it," she said, picking up her glass. "Seemed like the thing to do." I raised my glass in a toast. "To successful meetings." "To successful meetings," she echoed, clinking her glass against mine. We drank in silence for a moment. Then I set my glass down and pulled out my phone. "I've got something to show you," I said, scrolling to the photos Eddie had taken. "Remember when you said I was being paranoid?" Elise's face went pale as she saw the first image. Her walking out of the Riverside Inn, checking her phone, looking satisfied. "Gray, I can explain." "Can you?" I swiped to the next photo, Victor getting into his Tesla. "Because I'm really curious to hear how you explain a client meeting at a hotel with a married coworker." She set her wine glass down with shaking hands. "It's not what it looks like. It looks like you've been lying to me for months. It looks like you've been sleeping with Victor Sloan while I was at work, then coming home to play the loving wife." "You've followed me?" Her voice was rising, shifting from guilt to indignation. "You actually hired someone to spy on me?" "I didn't hire anyone. I just stopped being blind to what was right in front of me." Elise stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "You have no right to invade my privacy like that." "Privacy?" I laughed, and it came out harder than I'd intended. "You lost the right to privacy when you started fucking another man in hotel rooms." She spun around, eyes flashing. "Don't you dare talk to me like that." "How should I talk to you, Elise? Like the faithful wife you've been pretending to be? Like the woman who looks me in the eye and lies without blinking? You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Explain how this is all some big misunderstanding. Explain how those photos show something innocent." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the street where we'd built what I thought was a life together. "I didn't plan for this to happen," she said finally. "But it did happen. Yes. For how long? 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of coming home to me after being with him. Of playing the role of my wife while giving herself to someone else. Do you love him?" Another long pause. "I don't know." "Do you love me?" "I thought I did." "I wanted to. But we've been growing apart for years, Gray. You have to see that. Growing apart is not the same as cheating. Isn't it?" She turned back to face me, and I saw something hard in her expression. "When's the last time you really looked at me? Really talked to me about something other than work or bills or whose turn it is to take out the trash? When's the last time you gave me the chance? You've been too busy with your fake yoga classes and imaginary client meetings. Those weren't all fake. Some of them were real. Which ones? The Tuesday meetings or the Thursday meetings? Because I've got photos from both." Her face crumpled slightly. "Gray, please, can't we just what? Pretend this never happened? Go back to the way things were? We could try counseling. We could work on this." "We?" I stood up, feeling the anger shift into something colder and more focused. "There's no we anymore, Elise. You destroyed that when you decided Victor was worth more than our marriage. It doesn't have to be over. People get through this. People forgive. Some people do. I'm not some people." She stared at me for a moment, then her expression hardened. "So that's it? 5 years of marriage and you're just going to throw it all away because of one mistake?" "One mistake?" I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through the timeline I'd constructed. Tuesday, March 15th. Thursday, March 17th. Tuesday, March 22nd. Should I keep going? Because I've got 6 months of mistakes documented here. Elise's face flushed red. "You're being cruel. I'm being honest. Maybe you should try it sometime." "Fine." She grabbed her purse from the counter. "You want honesty? Here's honesty. Victor makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years. He's ambitious, he's going places, he appreciates what I bring to the table. He doesn't make me feel like I should apologize for being successful." I never asked you to apologize for anything. You didn't have to ask. It was in every look, every comment about my job, every time you made me feel guilty for making more money than you. That's not, it is, Gray. And you know what? Victor sees my potential. He believes in me. He doesn't just see me as someone to cook his dinner and wash his clothes. The words hit like a physical blow, not because they were entirely unfair, but because there was just enough truth in them to hurt. So this is my fault? This is both our faults, but you're the one who's refusing to fight for us. I shouldn't have to fight another man for my own wife. Elise slung her purse over her shoulder. I'm going to stay at Lena's tonight. Give you time to think about whether you want to save this marriage or just nurse your wounded pride. There's nothing to think about. There's everything to think about. Because if you can't forgive this, if you can't find a way to move past this, then you never really loved me at all. She headed for the door, then turned back. And Gray, if you ever have me followed again, if you ever violate my privacy like that again, I'll make sure you regret it. The threat hung in the air between us like smoke. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with an open bottle of wine and the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about my life. I sat back down at the kitchen table and poured myself another glass. The house felt different now. Not like a home, but like a crime scene. Every room held memories that had been poisoned by the truth. Every shared moment recontextualized by her betrayal. My phone buzzed. A text from Eddie. How did it go? I typed back. She's gone. For good? I looked around the kitchen, at the wine glasses and the photos still scattered on the table, at the space where my wife had been standing when she'd tried to make her. Infidelity my fault. Yeah, for good. But even as I sent the text, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Elise might be gone for the night, but this wasn't over. People like her didn't just disappear quietly. They fought back, they tried to control the narrative, they made sure everyone knew their version of events, which meant I needed to be ready for whatever came next. I gathered up the photos and headed down to my workshop. It was time to start planning for the war I hadn't wanted, but couldn't avoid. Elise came back 3 days later with a lawyer and a strategy. I was replacing a ceiling fan in our bedroom when I heard voices downstairs. Hers and a man's I didn't recognize. Professional, clipped, expensive sounding. Gray? Elise called up the stairs. Can you come down here, please? We need to talk. I finished connecting the ground wire before heading downstairs. Elise was sitting at the kitchen table across from a thin man in a $1,000 suit. She looked different, harder somehow, like she'd been practicing her expressions in a mirror. This is David Kellerman, she said, my attorney. Kellerman stood and offered his hand. I didn't take it. Mr. Foster, I represent your wife in what we hope can be an amicable dissolution of your marriage. Dissolution? I looked at Elise. Is that what we're calling it? It's what it is, she replied. We both know this marriage is over. Funny, 3 days ago you wanted to try counseling. Kellerman cleared his throat. Mr. Foster, my client is prepared to be reasonable about the division of assets, but there are certain conditions that need to be discussed. What kind of conditions? Elise leaned forward. The photos you took, Gray. The ones of me and the ones you took without my permission. I want them destroyed. All of them, Kellerman added. Along with any copies, digital files, or other documentation you may have gathered during your surveillance of my client. I sat down across from them, studying their faces. Elise looked nervous, despite her lawyer's presence. Kellerman looked like he was used to getting his way through intimidation. And if I refuse? Then we'll be forced to pursue legal remedies, Kellerman said smoothly. Invasion of privacy, harassment, stalking. There are several potential charges that could apply to your behavior. Stalking? I laughed. I followed my own wife. You conducted surveillance without her knowledge or consent. You photographed her in private moments. You violated her reasonable expectation of privacy. She was in a public parking lot. The photographs suggest a pattern of obsessive behavior that could be construed as threatening. I looked at Elise. This is really how you want to play it? Make me the villain? You made yourself the villain when you had me followed like some kind of criminal. You were committing adultery. Which isn't a crime, Kellerman interjected, unlike harassment and stalking. The anger was building again, but I kept my voice level. What exactly are you proposing? Elise pulled out a folder. I keep the house. You can have your tools and your truck. We split the bank accounts 50-50, and you destroy all the photos and any other evidence you collected. That's generous, Kellerman added, considering the potential legal exposure you're facing. I read through the papers quickly. It was worse than generous. It was insulting. She was offering me scraps from my own life while keeping everything of value. This house is half mine. The house is in my name, Elise said. I bought it with my income before we were married. I've been paying half the mortgage for 5 years. I've put thousands of hours of work into this place, which you did as my husband, not as a contractor. You have no legal claim to improvements made to my separate property. Kellerman nodded approvingly. My client is being more than fair, Mr. Foster. I'd advise you to consider her offer carefully. I set the papers down. And if I don't agree, then we go to court, Elise said. And everyone finds out what kind of man you really are. Everyone finds out how you stalked and harassed your wife instead of trying to save your marriage. Everyone finds out you've been cheating on me for 6 months. Everyone finds out I made a mistake while trying to cope with a husband who'd emotionally abandoned me years ago. She'd had time to practice her story, and it was good. The wronged wife, driven to infidelity by a cold, distant husband who responded to marital problems with surveillance and intimidation instead of love and understanding. I need time to think about this. You have 48 hours, Kellerman said, standing. After that, we file papers and let the court decide. They left together, Elise not bothering to look back as they walked out the door of what had been our home. I watched through the window as Kellerman held the passenger door of his BMW open for her. Professional courtesy or something more personal? My phone rang. Eddie. Saw the lawyer's car in your driveway. How bad is it? Bad. She wants me to destroy all the evidence and walk away with nothing. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Want some company while you figure it out? Yeah. Bring beer. Eddie arrived 20 minutes later with a six-pack and a grim expression. I filled him in on the meeting while we sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that represented the only stable thing left in my life. She's bluffing, he said when I finished. No prosecutor is going to file stalking charges against a husband who caught his wife cheating. Maybe not. But the threat doesn't have to be real to be effective. She just needs to make me worry about it. So what's your play? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos. I'm not sure yet, but I'm not going down without a fight. Good, because I did some digging on that lawyer of hers. What kind of digging? The kind that reveals David Kellerman specializes in high-asset divorces and has a reputation for playing dirty. Also, he's been married 3 times, which suggests he's got some personal experience with marital dysfunction. Anything useful? Maybe. His second wife accused him of having an affair with a client. Case was settled out of court, but the accusation is in the public record. I looked up from my phone. You think he's sleeping with Elise? I think successful, attractive women going through divorces are exactly his type. And I think Elise is exactly the kind of person who'd use that to her advantage. The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made sense. Elise had always been strategic about relationships, always looking for ways to leverage her charm and intelligence to get what she wanted. Even if you're right, how does that help me? It gives you options. Kellerman's not going to want his professional reputation damaged by another affair scandal, especially with a client. That's the kind of thing that gets lawyers disbarred. I thought about it. The idea of playing dirty appealed to the part of me that was tired of being the victim in this situation. But it also felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross. I need more information before I make any moves. What kind of information? The kind that tells me exactly who I'm dealing with. Eddie finished his beer and stood up. Whatever you decide, you know I've got your back. I know. And Eddie, thanks for being the one person in this mess I can actually trust. After he left, I sat in my workshop until well past midnight, thinking about loyalty and betrayal, about the difference between justice and revenge, about the kind of man I wanted to be when this was all over. By morning, I'd made my decision. Elise wanted to play hardball? Fine. But she was about to learn that blue-collar guys like me knew a few things about fighting dirty, too. The war was just beginning. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in the driveway working on my truck when a silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The woman who got out was elegant, well-dressed, and carrying herself with the kind of confidence that comes from having money and knowing how to use it. Mr. Foster? I'm Patricia Sloan. I believe you know my husband, Victor's wife. Up close, she was more attractive than her photos suggested. Mid-30s, blonde, with a kind of polish that came from expensive salons and personal trainers. But there was something hard in her eyes, something that suggested she hadn't come here for a social visit. Mrs. Sloan, I was wondering when we'd meet. May I come in? I think we have some things to discuss. I led her into the kitchen, noting how she took in the details. The expensive appliances Elise had insisted on, the granite countertops, the general affluence that suggested this wasn't the home of a struggling blue-collar worker. Coffee? I offered. Please. I poured 2 cups and sat down across from her. I assume this is about Victor and my wife. It is. Patricia's voice was crisp, controlled. I know about the affair, Mr. Foster. I've known for weeks. I'm sorry. That can't be easy. It's not. But what's harder is watching my husband make a fool of himself over a woman who's clearly using him. That got my attention. Using him how? Patricia opened her purse and pulled out a folder. Your wife has been very busy lately. New credit cards in her name, a personal loan application, inquiries about apartment rentals in the expensive part of town. She's preparing to leave you, but she's also preparing to leave Victor. I looked through the papers she'd handed me. Financial documents, credit reports, rental applications, all recent, all showing a woman planning for a future that didn't include either of her current men. How did you get these? I'm a real estate agent, Mr. Foster. I have resources, and I know how to use them. Patricia sipped her coffee. Your wife isn't just having an affair. She's planning an exit strategy that leaves both you and my husband holding the bag. What do you mean? The personal loan she applied for? It's for $50,000, using this house as collateral. The apartment she's been looking at? It's a luxury place downtown, the kind that requires first month, last month, and a substantial security deposit. She's planning to cash out and disappear. I studied the documents more carefully. The loan application was dated 3 days ago, the same day Elise had come home with her lawyer and her ultimatum. She told me the house was hers, bought with her income before we were married. It is. But you've been paying half the mortgage, which gives you certain rights. She can't take out a loan against the property without your knowledge, and she certainly can't do it without risking your claim to the equity you've built up. So she needs me to sign away my rights. Exactly. And she needs to do it quickly, before you have time to get your own lawyer and figure out what she's really up to. I set the papers down. Why are you telling me this? Patricia's smile was sharp. Because my husband is an idiot. But he's my idiot. And I don't intend to let your wife destroy my marriage so she can fund her new life. What do you propose? An alliance. You help me expose Elise for what she really is, and I'll help you make sure she doesn't walk away with everything you've worked for. It was tempting. Patricia clearly had resources and connections I lacked, and the information she'd brought me changed everything about how I understood Elise's strategy. What kind of help are we talking about? The kind that ensures both our spouses understand exactly what they're dealing with. The kind that makes sure actions have consequences. I thought about it. Elise had been playing chess while I'd been playing checkers, thinking several moves ahead while I'd been reacting to each crisis as it arose. Maybe it was time to start thinking strategically. What did you have in mind? Patricia pulled out her phone. There's a charity gala next weekend. The annual fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Victor and I attend every year, and this year, your wife will be his date. How do you know? Because I suggested it. I told Victor I couldn't attend due to a family emergency, and I encouraged him to bring someone from work, someone who could help him network with potential clients. And he bought that? Men like Victor are remarkably easy to manipulate when they think they're being clever. He believes he's found the perfect opportunity to show off his new girlfriend in public without technically cheating on his wife. I had to admire the strategy. What happens at this gala? That depends on how creative you're feeling, Mr. Foster, but I imagine a public venue full of their professional colleagues would be an excellent place for certain truths to come to light. The idea was appealing, but it also felt dangerous. Public confrontations had a way of spinning out of control, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that level of drama. I need to think about this. Of course. But don't think too long. The gala is Saturday night, and after that, your wife's timeline accelerates. She'll push for a quick settlement, take her money, and disappear before either of us can stop her. Patricia stood to leave, then turned back. Mr. Foster? Your wife isn't the only one who can play games, but unlike her, we don't have to lie or cheat to win. After she left, I sat in my kitchen staring at the financial documents she'd given me. Everything I'd thought I understood about Elise's motivations had been wrong. This wasn't about love, or passion, or even dissatisfaction with our marriage. This was about money and opportunity and a calculated plan to upgrade her life at everyone else's expense. My phone buzzed. A text from Elise. Have you decided about the settlement? David needs an answer by tomorrow. I typed back, still thinking. Don't overthink it, Gray. This is the best offer you're going to get. The best offer. Like she was doing me a favor by letting me walk away from my own life with nothing but my tools and my truck. I called Eddie. I need to ask you something, I said when he answered. How far are you willing to go to help me with this? How far do you need me to go? Maybe further than either of us is comfortable with. Eddie was quiet for a moment. What are you planning? I'm planning to make sure Elise doesn't get away with this, but I'm also planning to do it in a way that doesn't destroy my own life in the process. That sounds reasonable. What do you need? I need you to trust me, even when what I'm asking doesn't make complete sense. I can do that. What else? I need you to help me crash a party. The Children's Hospital Charity Gala was held at the Grand Ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, the same chain as the inn where I'd photographed Elise and Victor, which felt like poetic justice. Eddie and I arrived early, dressed in the best suits we owned and carrying credentials that identified us as representatives of Morrison Electrical Services, a legitimate business Eddie had started as a side venture. I still can't believe they bought the sponsor story, Eddie muttered as we walked through the lobby. $2,000 buys a lot of credibility, I replied, and Patricia's recommendation didn't hurt. The ballroom was elegant in an understated way. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. The kind of event where people came to see and be seen, where business cards were exchanged over champagne, and deals were made between the appetizer course and the main dish. We found our table, number 12, strategically positioned with a clear view of the head table where the evening's honored guests would be seated. Patricia had been thorough in her planning. There she is, Eddie said, nodding toward the entrance. Elise walked in wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, something expensive and elegant that hugged her curves in all the right places. Victor was beside her in a tuxedo, looking pleased with himself as he guided her through the crowd of Portland's social elite. They made a handsome couple, I had to admit. They looked like they belonged together in this world of charity galas and networking events. They looked like success. You okay? Eddie asked, noting my expression. I'm fine, just observing. Patricia appeared at our table, stunning in a deep blue gown that probably cost more than I made in a month. Gentlemen. Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it, I said. Everything ready? Almost. I just need to make sure Victor sees me before the main event begins. She moved away, working the room with practiced ease. I watched as she made her way toward Victor and Elise, timing her approach perfectly to coincide with a moment when they were surrounded by Victor's colleagues. The confrontation was subtle, masterful in its execution. Patricia appeared at Victor's elbow, just as he was introducing Elise to a potential client, her smile bright and dangerous. Darling, she said, kissing Victor's cheek. I'm so glad I could make it after all. The family emergency resolved itself. Victor's face went white. Elise looked confused, then alarmed, as she realized who Patricia was. Patricia, Victor stammered. I thought you were in Boston. Change of plans, and you must be Elise. Patricia extended her hand to my wife. Victor's told me so much about you. His new colleague, isn't that right? The group around them sensed drama and began paying closer attention. Elise managed to smile, but I could see the panic in her eyes from across the room. Yes, we worked together on the Peterson project. How lovely. And how convenient that you could fill in as Victor's date when I couldn't attend. Though I have to say, you two look awfully comfortable together for work colleagues. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Victor was sweating visibly. Elise was struggling to maintain her composure, and their audience was starting to whisper among themselves. Perhaps we should find our table, Victor suggested. Of course. I believe we're at table 3 with the other board members. Patricia's smile never wavered. Elise, dear, where are you sitting? I'm not sure. Oh, but you must have a table assignment. Unless, Patricia paused dramatically, unless you're Victor's guest? But that would be odd, wouldn't it, since I'm Victor's wife? The whispers were getting louder now. Someone pulled out a phone, probably to capture whatever was about to happen. This was exactly the kind of social media moment that would be all over Facebook by morning. I stood up and walked over to the group. "Excuse me," I said, inserting myself into the circle. "I believe there's been some confusion." Elise's eyes went wide when she saw me. "Gray? What are you doing here?" "I'm here as a sponsor. Morrison Electrical Services donated to the Children's Hospital." I looked around the group, noting their interested faces, and I couldn't help but notice my wife seems to be having some kind of seating arrangement problem. "Your wife?" one of Victor's colleagues asked. "Elise Foster. We've been married for 5 years. I put my arm around Elise's waist, feeling her tense against me. Though lately she's been working such long hours, I barely see her. "Working long hours," Patricia repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, Victor's mentioned how dedicated Elise is. All those late meetings, all those business trips. The crowd was growing larger now, drawn by the obvious drama playing out in front of them. I could see phones being raised, social media posts being crafted in real time." "Gray," Elise said quietly, "we need to talk privately." "Do we?" "Because I thought we said everything we needed to say the other night. You know, when you told me how Victor makes you feel alive in ways I haven't in years," the gasps from the crowd were audible now. This was better than reality TV, and everyone knew it. Victor finally found his voice. "This is inappropriate. We should all calm down and—" "Calm down?" I turned to face him directly. "You've been sleeping with my wife for 6 months, and you want me to calm down? That's not— We haven't—" Victor looked around desperately for an escape route. "Haven't what? Haven't been meeting at the Riverside Inn every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon? Haven't been using her fake business meetings as cover for your affair?" Patricia stepped closer to Victor. "Is that true, darling? Have you been having an affair?" "Patricia, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Just like I'm sure you can explain why you thought I was in Boston when I never told you I was leaving town." The trap was closing beautifully. Victor was caught between his wife and his mistress, surrounded by his professional colleagues, with nowhere to run and no plausible lies left to tell. "This is insane," Elise said, trying to push through the crowd. "I'm leaving." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "before you go, there's something everyone should see." I'd spent hours editing the video Eddie had taken, cutting together the most damning moments into a 3-minute highlight reel. Elise leaving the hotel room, Victor following. The two of them together in the parking lot, kissing goodbye before driving away in separate cars. "This was taken last Tuesday," I announced to the crowd, during one of those important business meetings. The video played on my phone's screen, but in the silence of the ballroom, everyone could see what was happening. The gasps and murmurs grew louder as the evidence played out in high definition. "You bastard," Elise hissed. "You filmed us without permission." "I documented my wife's adultery. There's a difference." Security was moving toward us now, probably alerted by the hotel staff that something was happening. But the damage was done. Half the room had seen the video, the other half was hearing about it secondhand, and social media was already lighting up with posts about the drama at the charity gala. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator announced over the microphone, "if we could all take our seats, dinner will be served shortly." The crowd began to disperse reluctantly, but the conversations continued. Victor and Elise had become the evening's entertainment, and there was no putting that genie back in the bottle. Patricia leaned close to Victor. "We'll talk about this at home, darling, assuming you still have a home to come back to." She walked away with her head high, every inch the dignified wife wronged by her cheating husband. Elise grabbed my arm. "We're leaving. Now." "We?" "There's no we anymore, remember? You made that clear when you served me with divorce papers." "Gray, please. This is humiliating." "Good. Maybe now you know how I felt when I found out my wife was cheating on me." I walked back to my table, leaving Elise standing alone in the middle of the ballroom. She looked around desperately, realizing that Victor had disappeared and she had no allies left in the room. Finally, she gathered what remained of her dignity and walked toward the exit, her head held high, but her face flushed with embarrassment. Eddie raised his glass as I sat back down. "Well, that was something." "That was justice," I replied. But even as I said it, I knew we weren't done yet. Public humiliation was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Elise was still planning to take half of everything I'd worked for, and she still had her lawyer and her schemes. The real war was just beginning. The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, the video had been shared across social media platforms. Local news had picked up the story, and both Elise and Victor were facing professional consequences that went far beyond personal embarrassment. I was in my workshop when Patricia called. "Have you seen the news?" she asked. "Which news?" "Victor's been suspended from his position, pending an internal investigation. Apparently the company has a strict policy about relationships that could create conflicts of interest, and his affair with a married colleague violated several ethical guidelines." "What about Elise?" "She's been asked to take a leave of absence while they review her involvement in the Peterson project. There are questions about whether her relationship with Victor influenced business decisions." It was more than I'd hoped for. Professional consequences were often more devastating than personal ones, especially for people like Elise and Victor, who defined themselves by their careers. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "Victor came home last night. He wants to try to save our marriage." "How do you feel about that?" "I feel like he's terrified of losing his comfortable life more than he's sorry for betraying our vows. But that's my problem to solve." She was right. Whatever happened between Patricia and Victor was their business now. My focus needed to be on Elise and the divorce settlement she was still trying to force on me. I didn't have to wait long. Kellerman called that afternoon. "Mr. Foster, I think we need to discuss the situation that arose at the charity gala." "What situation would that be?" "The public humiliation of my client. The unauthorized recording and distribution of private moments. The deliberate sabotage of her professional reputation." "You mean the documentation of her adultery? The evidence of the lies she's been telling for months?" "I mean the vindictive behavior that's going to look very bad in court when we seek damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress." I laughed. "Good luck with that. Your client committed adultery, lied about it repeatedly, and tried to steal half of everything I own. I don't think any judge is going to be sympathetic to her claims of emotional distress." "Perhaps not, but they might be interested in your pattern of stalking and harassment. They might wonder what other illegal activities you've engaged in during your campaign of revenge." "I haven't engaged in any illegal activities." "Haven't you? Breaking into hotel property to film guests without their consent? Using that footage to publicly humiliate and defame my client? I think a prosecutor might see things differently. The threat was more serious this time, backed by actual events instead of hypothetical scenarios. But I'd been expecting this escalation, and I was prepared for it. "Mr. Kellerman, before you make any more threats, there's something you should know." "What's that?" "I know about your relationship with Elise, the personal relationship that goes beyond attorney-client privilege." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've been sleeping with your client, which violates professional ethics rules and could result in your disbarment. So before you threaten me with criminal charges, maybe you should consider what kind of scrutiny that would bring to your own conduct. You have no proof of any improper relationship. Don't I? Because I've been doing some research on your previous cases, and there's an interesting pattern. Attractive female clients, extended representation periods, and settlements that seem unusually favorable to you personally. I was bluffing, but it was an educated bluff, based on Patricia's information and my own observations." Kellerman's defensive response suggested I was on the right track. "This conversation is over, Mr. Foster." "Yes, it is. And so are your threats. You want to take this to court? Fine. Let's see how well your reputation survives the discovery process." He hung up without another word. 2 hours later, Elise called. "We need to meet," she said. "Somewhere private where we can talk, without lawyers or threats or any more public humiliation. I think we've said everything we need to say to each other." "Please, Gray." Just one conversation. Just the two of us, like it used to be. There was something in her voice I hadn't heard in months. Vulnerability, maybe even genuine emotion. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at Murphy's bar. Neutral territory where we could talk without the baggage of our shared home. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her since the early days of our relationship. The confident, manipulative woman who'd been playing chess with everyone's lives was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely defeated. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I sat down across from her. "What do you want, Elise?" I want to apologize for all of it. The lying, the cheating, the way I tried to make it your fault when you caught me. Okay. Apology noted. What else? I want to explain why I did it. Not to excuse it, but to help you understand. I signaled the bartender for a beer. I'm listening. I felt trapped, Gray. Trapped in a life that was comfortable but not exciting. Trapped in a marriage that was stable but not passionate. I felt like I was disappearing, becoming just another suburban wife whose biggest decision was what to make for dinner. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel alive again. Victor made me feel special, important, like I was worth pursuing instead of just being taken for granted. I never took you for granted. Didn't you? When's the last time you surprised me with anything? When's the last time you looked at me the way you used to when we were dating? The question stung because there was truth in them. We'd fallen into the comfortable routines that long-term couples develop, and somewhere along the way, we'd stopped making effort for each other. That doesn't justify what you did. No, it doesn't, but it explains it. Elise leaned forward. Gray, I know I've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we could still fix this. We could still save our marriage if we both wanted to. Do you want to? I want to want to. I want to go back to the way things were before everything got so complicated. Before you started sleeping with Victor, you mean? She flinched. Yes. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but what I saw was exhaustion and regret, and something that might have been genuine remorse. It's too late, Elise. Why? Because of your pride? Because of trust. Because once it's broken, it can't be fixed. Because every time I looked at you, I'd wonder if you were lying to me again. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. So that's it? 5 years of marriage and you're just going to walk away? You walked away first. I'm just acknowledging the reality of the situation. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. What happens now? Now we get divorced, but we do it fairly, without lawyers threatening each other or anyone trying to steal what the other person worked for. What does that mean? I pulled out a folder I'd prepared. It means we split everything 50-50. The house, the bank accounts, the debts. It means we both walk away with our dignity intact and our futures still possible. Elise looked through the papers. This is more than fair. It's generous. It's what's right. Why? After everything I've done, why are you being decent about this? I thought about that question. The anger was still there, the sense of betrayal and disappointment, but underneath it was something else. A recognition that we'd both contributed to the failure of our marriage, even if we'd done it in different ways. Because I loved you once. Because you were my wife, and that meant something to me, even if it didn't mean enough to you. She started crying harder then, the kind of tears that come from genuine grief rather than self-pity. I'm sorry, Gray. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know you are, and I forgive you for what that's worth. It's worth everything. We sat in silence for a while, mourning the end of something that had once been good, acknowledging the finality of what we were doing. Finally, Elise signed the papers. What will you do now? She asked. Start over, I guess. Figure out what comes next. What about me? What do I do? You figure out what comes next too, but you do it somewhere else, with someone else. You do it honestly this time. She nodded, gathered her purse, and stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, Gray, you're a better man than I deserved. Yeah, I said. I was. After she left, I sat in Murphy's until closing time, drinking beer and thinking about the difference between justice and revenge, about the satisfaction of winning versus the cost of fighting, about the kind of man I wanted to be when all of this was over. By the time I walked out into the cool night air, I knew I'd made the right choice. Not the satisfying choice, not the dramatic choice, but the right one. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's just walking away with your integrity intact and letting other people live with the consequences of their choices. 6 months later, I heard through Eddie that Elise had moved to Seattle and taken a job with a nonprofit organization. Victor and Patricia were still married, The word was they were in counseling and he was on a very short leash. As for me, I bought a smaller house closer to work, started dating again, and discovered that starting over at 40 wasn't the end of the world. It was just the beginning of something different. Something honest.